You see, he's not quite dead. He simply won't get up. Every head turned towards the enormous holographic display with the alien Titan's image looming, and Sergeant Kessler's voice broke through the confusion of the command tent. Kessler's words hung in the air like a challenge, an invitation to laugh off the ridiculousness of it all, but nobody did so and refused to get up. Private Ward muttered, "That thing's the size of a skyscraper. You're telling me he's just lounging exactly that?" Kessler responded, resetting the feed to zoom in on the Titan's still body. The creature had been lying there for weeks, a colossus draped across the planet's jagged terrain like a fallen mountain. Every other species had written it off and abandoned their Titan savior when it failed to rise, even as the war got out of control, but the humans had not yet turned their heads. Kessler kept his eyes narrowing at the display, saying, "We may have fought our way to him, but he's still breathing, still alive, and we're the only ones who haven't given up." The room was tense, but Kessler didn't flinch. He looked at his men's faces to see how they felt about the mission. They had fought through alien trenches and storm-fortified positions to get here, and the alien Titan, once heralded as a savior by a dozen species, now lay abandoned like a broken tool. Everyone else saw the mission as a death sentence for all hope, except, of course, the humans, who had endured worse. Captain Dre broke the tension in the tent by speaking up. His voice was always composed and grounded. "We've faced greater challenges than this one. The issue now is whether we should keep our work secret or walk away like everyone else." Ward snorted, "It doesn't matter that we're ants in comparison to that thing. It's a literal Titan with bigger obstacles." Dre said that the only thing that counts is whether we let the others to label this a failure or whether we complete the task that they were unable to. Ward moved uneasily as he looked at the Titan's picture once again. "It doesn't even seem to want to fight anymore. What are we to do?" "Kindly ask it to get up and join the conflict, which isn't too far from the plan. The Titan's physiology is in hibernation mode, or at least that's the closest translation. Its body is shut down to heal itself, but we believe we can wake it up with the correct stimulant," Kessler said with a chuckle as he pressed a joystick to bring up a number of diagnostics. Corporal Hegg laughed loudly. "What is the stimulant for a pleasant bedtime breakfast?" Kessler touched the data once again, ignoring the joke. A new screen with a list of compounds appears. Nothing on the scale has ever worked on a house cat before, but something in this combination mixed with our human neurological inputs could bring its system back online. "This is different," Ward said, crossing his arms. "That monster has been offline for weeks, so even if we were to wake it up, who knows if it wouldn't fight." The stillness returned deeper this time, and everyone knew it wasn't only about awakening the Titan. Kessler gave Ward a stern look, saying, "That's the risk we're taking, but if we pull this off, we've got an alien Titan on our side, not to mention we'll make the rest of the galaxy look like cowards for abandoning him." This was about demonstrating humanity's resolve and refusal to back down when the stakes were high. The other species have fled to their corners of the galaxy, unwilling to take the risk, but humans were never content to walk away from a fight, especially one as important as this one. Captain Dre broke the silence and asked, "How long do we have until the front lines break? 2 days, maybe 3. Hegg replied, "If we don't get that Titan up, the enemy is going to roll through us like we're not even here. Then we've got 2 days to make this work." Dre said, "I still will prep the team. Ward, you're on transport duty. Kessler, you get the injection ready." Ward threw up his hands, "So I'm driving us into the belly of a sleeping Titan. Great." As preparations began, the ground beneath their base rumbled, the faint sound of distant artillery shaking the tent. The war was creeping closer. The enemy forces knew the humans were the last ones left protecting the Titan, and they weren't about to leave them alone. "You'll be up close and personal with the galaxy's most feared creature. Not every day you can say that." Ward muttered something under his breath, but he didn't argue further. Although it sounded crazy, there was a strange thrill to the mission. They were about to do something no other species had the courage to even try. "Hopefully, he is a morning person." As they made their way to the van, Hay laughed while throwing his firearm over his shoulder. Captain Dre stopped just outside the tent, looking out toward the horizon where the alien Titan lay dormant. He didn't speak for a moment, just stood there watching like he was trying to gauge what kind of future lay ahead. "We make this work," he said finally, "or we go down trying." No one responded. They didn't need to. They all knew what was on the line. This wasn't just about the Titan. It was about showing the galaxy what humans were made of. Were others, saw failure they saw a challenge, and where others turned away they dug in their heels and fought, because that's what humans did, and this time they weren't about to lose. As the transport rumbled across the desolate terrain, Ward stared out at the looming figure of the Titan still sprawled across the horizon like a mountain range that had collapsed under its own weight. The alien landscape was scarred from weeks of bombardment, jagged craters and blasted debris littering the ground, yet there amidst the destruction, the Titan remained untouched for something so massive it was almost eerie how motionless it was. From the seat next to him, Ward shook his head and said, "I still can't believe we're doing this. Quit complaining." He tightened his grip on his rifle and said, "We've done crazier things." Ward shot back, and he smiled. "It was crazy when we hotwired a destroyed alien Dren and used it as a battering ram against the Corbin fleet, but this is different. We're simply hoping it wakes up on the right side of the bed and chooses to assist us, so let's make sure it wakes up in the mood to fight." Ward said, his voice dropping, "That thing out there doesn't care if we live or die." It wasn't that Dre didn't comprehend the hazards, he simply had a way of dismissing them. Captain Dre spoke from the front of the shuttle with a calmness that Ward never really trusted. The Titan was a living fortress, with enormous limbs that stretched out across the ground, each claw larger than their transport. Its skin was a dark slate gray armor that was thicker than any military-grade plating humans had ever produced. Ward's side focused back on the Titan as they drew closer, and even though it hadn't moved in weeks, its size was overwhelming. "We'll set up at the base of the Titan's neck, which is where the main neural cluster is. If we inject the stimulant there, it should trigger a response," Kessler remarked, standing towards the rear with his equipment ready. "You're really selling this plan," Ward repeated. Kessler murked, "Calm down. I've been doing the calculations all night, and the dose is adjusted to take into consideration its enormous body mass. If it doesn't work, we'll be forced to choose between an opposing battalion and a sleeping monster." He turned to Heg. Dre added, "We just have a few minutes until they pick up our signal, so keep an eye on things while we finish this." As the team disembarked, the transport came to a stop, its engines humming softly. The air was tense, and Ward felt the weight of the massive form pressing down on him. Up close, the Titan's colossal form was even more imposing, dwarfing them to the point of absurdity with its sheer size. The ground near the Titan's body was cracked, shifting the weight of its sleeping mass enough to change the surrounding landscape. Ward and Hag stood watch while Kessler quickly set up his equipment. The injection device resembled a missile launcher more than anything medical, but it made sense since they weren't exactly dealing with something that could be injected with a syringe. "Just make sure you get the proper location." As Kessler aimed the injector, Ward said, "Will you relax?" Kessler mumbled as he adjusted his aim. "I never imagined that people would beg to go to war, but when Captain Yell dropped the bombshell on the council, the room fell silent and no one dared to breathe." His pale blue skin shimmered in the harsh war room lights, and his 4 eyes darted nervously across the table. The atmosphere became tense as all the aliens present tried to process the strange species' bizarre offer. Beg Admiral Threx, a towering Tiarashian with a chest of armor plating that made him look like a living tank. Captain Yell shuffled awkwardly, his eyes darting back to the data pad in front of him. They were practically demanding to be deployed. Since the start of the war, the council chamber had seen a number of odd events, but none had anticipated this one. Before the Scourge arrived, no one had considered humanity a serious ally. They were a backwater species from a dangerous planet that was barely advanced enough to handle space travel. The Scourge devoured entire systems in a matter of weeks, their organic ships tearing through fleets like a predator in a feeding frenzy. Every species had sent their best strategists and warriors to tackle the issue, but none had been able to even slow them down. Planets were falling one after another, and the Galactic Alliance was in a state of complete collapse when the humans made contact. Because the Scourge has previously destroyed fleets with millennia of battle experience, why would they not be suicidal? General Ral of the Krokan Republic leaned forward, his scaled face tightening in bewilderment. Yell cut him off, reiterating that they are upset and believe they can prevail. Wynn sneered. Admiral Thorax adjusted his enormous bulk against the swarm of death that is madness, his armor clinking. The room goes silent as Gel continues, They come from a planet that is hostile to their very existence, and they fought for survival from the moment they evolved. Wars are common for them. They're unlike us. They thrive in it. Gel sighed, looking at his data pad once more. Their diplomats gave us a briefing of their history, explaining that humans have a unique relationship with Khan. We're talking about the Scourge here, a species devoid of mercy, frailty, a code of behavior, treaties, and nothing but sheer annihilation, yet General Harrell clicked his claws together in serious concentration. I am aware that JEL nodded, which is precisely why people want to enter and have been studying the Scourge. As soon as we notify them of the facts, their strategists assert that they have already discovered a pattern in the chaos and in their assaults. Their deep voice conveyed astonishment that our greatest strategists were unable to comprehend the swarm. How might a species that has just spent a century or so in space figure out its resourcefulness? Yell responded, but even he seemed doubtful while speaking, and they conveyed us a troubling message. The council members leaned forward to watch as Yell tapped his pad and a holographic image flashed into view in the middle of the table. The aliens had never seen anything like this before. "What is this, General Harrell?" he asked in a low voice. "A battlefield cemetery?" Millions of people had died in one of their last world wars, and that was just one conflict they'd had. There was a pause for dozens of years as the weight of the image set that humanity hadn't just survived wars, they had been shaped by them. "Why show us this, Admiral Threx?" he asked in a softer, more cautious tone. "They wanted us to understand that if the galaxy is going to survive, it must fight the Scourge in a way that only humans can comprehend. They asked for control over our defensive forces, and the room erupted into madness. We're talking about a civilization that hasn't yet invented interstellar travel, and you want us to give them control of our fleets?" Threx roared, smashing a fist into the table. General Harrell clicked his claws once more while reflecting, "But if what you say is accurate, they may have experience and be able to see things that we cannot. The Scourge is merciless. Maybe we must be as merciless." Chell nodded. The humans seem to believe that their warriors are requesting permission to lead the battle rather than a place at the table. "Do you imply that they are requesting that we leave the fight?" The chamber lapsed into another uncomfortable stillness as the council members turned to face one another. The thought of placing humanity in command was ridiculous, the Threx hissed, and Gel swallowed in a sort. Careless, but so was the notion of seeing the galaxy burn. "What is their strategy?" When General H finally asked, Yell activated. Another image, this time of heavily armored human warships armed with weapons. Unlike the fleets of the Alliance, they were blunt, brutal instruments of destruction that planned to strike at the Scourge's heart directly, overwhelming force. There were no attempts at negotiation or retreats, just War Threx grunting and narrowing his eyes as he stared at the hologram. "That sounds dangerous," and they agreed, but they told me that if we're willing to let them lead, we'll see why humans have never lost a war for survival. There was a final heavy pause before Harold leaned back in his seat and sighed through his teeth, making the decision seem clear. The council chamber was filled with a chorus of uneasy agreements, but one thing was now certain: humanity was about to lead the charge. "Are they serious? These ships look crude?" General H's claws clicked again, this time in a slow, methodical rhythm, as he mowed over the situation. "And if they fail, Yell, don't hesitate, they won't." As the hologram moved uncomfortably crude, the Threx grumbled, scrutinizing the human battleship designs. "Yes, but it works well." The council chamber was filled with whispers as the alien leaders contemplated the holographic fleet. The human vessels were thick, blocky, covered in armor plating, and everything about them screamed aggression and durability. Humans prioritize function over form, and while their technology may not seem impressive to us, it works. Their ships are built to withstand damage and continue fighting, and their weapons are made to destroy rather than intimidate. This Threx rumbled, "Relinquishing control of our ships still makes me uneasy since they seem reckless and too erratic." General Frow's scaled brow furrowed as he nodded slowly. "Perhaps reckless, but desperate times need desperate actions. We have exhausted all alternatives, and the epidemic is at our doorstep. We must take into account not just their ships or their strategies, but also the humans themselves." I've spent time with their warriors, and they are unlike anything we've ever seen." Yell cleared his throat and leaned forward. "Humans are weaker than most of us, so how could they possibly withstand the scourge? At first, I assumed that one blow from their bioweapons would destroy them. However, people's resilience lies in their minds rather than their bodies. They fight until nothing is left, even when the odds are stacked against them. When the scourge struck their outpost on Icarus 9, the humans didn't panic or run away like the other species did. Instead, they adapted, identifying the scourge's weak points in a matter of hours and striking back with more force than we initially believed. To me, this sounds like foolish pride, but it's more than pride, as Yell insisted." General Harrell narrowed his piercing eyes and said, "They're ready to do this on a larger scale." Yell nodded. They had been researching and formulating their plan ever since they joined the Alliance. The Scourge believes they have discovered a way to defeat them after studying all they can. Why are they so certain? THX's armored fist is clenched. Yell paused before tapping his datapad once again. When the hologram changed to show a video feed from a human training ground, soldiers moved with precision, their weapons blazing in drills that mimicked the chaotic environment of a scourge attack. However, it was not just their efficiency that caught the Council's attention, it was also their eagerness, as they could be seen by the way his claws clicked against the table. They are certain that this isn't just another war for them, rather, it's an opportunity to prove themselves or be killed. They may have acknowledged that they are scum, but they are confident that their plan is to attack the scourge where it hurts most, without holding back or waiting for the ideal moment. Even then, given the scourge's destruction of the galaxy, maybe reckless was just what they needed. What is the cost? RW finally broke the silence, and Yell looked down at his datapad. They said, they just want to survive because they know that if we fall, they're next, and humanity isn't fighting for us, they're fighting for themselves, and they believe this is their best chance. They don't want territory, resources, or political influence. All they've asked for is the opportunity to fight Threx and let out a low growl, so they want the glory. Kral's claws tapped out a steady, reflective rhythm. It's a huge chance, but maybe we should take it if they're as committed as you claim. Yell nodded as a wave of comfort passed over him. I think it's our only choice. When the Threx crossed his enormous arms, his metal skin creaked. I still don't like it, but I guess there isn't much of an option. That CWL has been insured by the Scourge. We'll give the humans a chance, but don't be fooled. Rose rose from his seat, his reptile shape looming over the rest of the council. Captain, you will be held accountable if this doesn't work out. KCK steadied his voice. I trust them, but I understand, General. Faith Threx spat the word like it was an insult. We'll see if your faith can stand up to reality when the Scourge arrives. Yell held his gaze, but said nothing. Inside he was just as uncertain as the others, but he had seen something in the humans that he couldn't explain, something that made him believe they might just be what the galaxy needed. As the council session ended, the decision was made. The humans would lead the charge against the Scourge. It was a risk, a wild, improbable gamble, but for the first time since the war began, there was a flicker of hope in the air. Yell watched as the council members dispersed, their expressions ranging from grim to cautiously optimistic. The galaxy's fate now rested in the hands of the most unpredictable species it had ever encountered, and the battle was about to begin. The battle began without fanfare, without any grand speeches or declarations. It was quiet in space. There's no sound to carry the thunderous roar of engines or the explosive impacts of weapons. It was only the flashes of light, deadly, brilliant, and relentless, that filled the void. The human fleet moved first, their ships diving straight into the heart of the Scourge swarm. It was a sight that left even the hardened alien veterans in awe. No hesitation, no second thoughts. They just charged from the command deck of the capital ship Atlas. Captain Jellic watched, his 4 eyes fixed on the chaotic scene unfolding before him. The Scourge ships, organic, monstrous things, started toward the human vessels like predators sensing fresh prey. Their weapons fired in bursts of acid-like projectiles, the kind that had torn through entire fleets before, but the human ships were ready. Their thick armored hulls absorbed the initial hits, shaking but not breaking. For every blow they took, they returned fire. The Scourge's biological ships were smashed by the merciless efficiency of the 10-fold enormous railguns, which fired bullets at almost light speed. The darkness was illuminated by plasma cannons, whose beams sliced through the swarm like a knife through grain as they held a whispery shout in shock that they were winning. No one has ever battled the Scourge like this. It's as if they're furious. General Harrell adjusted his wide-open eyes as he saw the human fleet press closer into the enemy's formation. Jellic nodded, but he was too preoccupied to answer since he had seen the fervor in the human eyes before to the fight. They weren't just there to survive, they were also there to defeat the Scourge, who battled back. Of course, they were many and merciless, but the humans had threaded through the swarm like skilled hunters, removing the Scourge ships one by one and moving forward with a single objective in mind to reach the Scourge command vessel in the heart of the swarm. This was the first time the Alliance had a fleet that didn't back down. As the battle progressed, something changed. The Scourge, which had been so relentless and overwhelming in every previous battle, started to falter. Their movements became more erratic and less coordinated. For the first time in this war, they were being outmaneuvered. The communications officer for Atlas raised his voice and said, "We're receiving a transmission from the human command ship. Put it through Jellic's voice." "Captain," one of Yelika's officers, called out, pointing at a screen. The Bat General Connor, the human fleet commander, was seen on the screen. His expression was composed, but his eyes were burning intensely. "We're in position," he remarked sharply, unleashing the cargo. Before Yell could respond, Harrell questioned in confusion, and the humans moved from a number of their spacecraft. Something enormous was launched, but it wasn't a weapon, at least not in the traditional sense. It was a fusion bomb, a gigantic torpedo bigger than anything Yell had ever seen. Yell's eyes widened as he saw they were headed straight to the center of the plague. "Do they know what they're doing?" The Hurl concluded his speech with a bomb that sliced through space and glided towards the center of the Scourge fleet. The enemy ships attempted to intercept it, but the human forces used everything they had to shield it. The Scourge ships exploded as the humans threw themselves into the fray, sacrificing their own ships to make sure the bomb reached its target. From the other side of the room, Trex mumbled, his voice laced with amazement that the blast would destroy everything within range. "They know what JEL stated in a low whisper, but they don't care since this is how they fight, all or nothing." When the bomb hit the Scourge's command vessel, a huge twisted object that pulsed with dark energy, there was a flash of light so bright that it blinded the sensors for a few seconds, and then there was silence. The humans had done it. When the sensors cleared, the Scourge fleet was gone, and where there had once been thousands of ships, there was only debris. The swarm's heart had been destroyed in the blast, and once Unstoppable was broken, Yell exhaled. His body trembled as he realized what had just happened. "They did it, they won," Crawl whispered, his voice full of awe. The human fleet was still there, albeit battered and reduced. Many of their ships had been destroyed in the final moments, sacrificing themselves to protect the bomb's path, but the ones that remained were already regrouping in preparation for the next phase. Yell gazed in awe as the human survivors sent out their victory signal. It was a brief message, but it conveyed the message that the fight was ended and the plague was gone. For a brief period, Jellex allowed the fact that the galaxy had been saved, not by the most powerful fleets or the most evolved species, by humanity, the race that had previously been written off as primitive, chaotic, and unpredictable. In the end, it was their unpredictability that had prevailed in the conflict.